So as I mentioned, the AP Style book is really your Bible to know all of the different style usage that we have as it relates to news and feature writing. And so here's just some key concepts I want you to start to get familiar with. The best way you're going to start to understand this book is really to delve into it, to start reading it, to start looking things up, really to look up everything that you might have any potential question about is going to be the best way to see how style relates to the story that you're writing. But here's some examples. So let's just think about some things that you might want to look up. You might need to figure out how to punctuate or capitalize a magazine title, how you might mention a teenager in a story or related to age, writing about the voting outcome in an election. How would you write the John Boehner's a Republican from the state of Ohio? How would you write the 1980s? These are questions that are going to come up, and don't guess. We need you to look them up in the book because the book has the answers. So here's where you're going to look for those answers. You want to find out about punctuating or capitalizing a magazine title? Go to composition titles. You want to see how to mention a teenager? Look at children and juveniles. How would you like to write the voting outcome? Look for vote tabulation. Party affiliation will tell you how to write about John Boehner. And apostrophes will show you where you'd put the apostrophe in 1980s. And I'll give you a hint. It doesn't go after the 0 and before the S. So here's a little quiz for you. Let's see how we do. Which is correct? Is it website all one word, website two words, website all one word capitalized, or website two words? The NBC show, is it the Today Show, today in quotes, or today underlined? Where would you put the question mark in this story? If you wanted to assure he'd make the team, or do you want to ensure he'd make the team? And how do you use email? Is it with a hyphen or without? So here's the answers for you. Website is actually all one word, and this is a fairly recent change that we've been doing where you don't capitalize it and it's one word. Today utilizes quotes, and you'd find that under composition titles for TV programs. Why even try? Notice that the question mark goes inside the quote marks. All punctuation goes inside quote marks, and you'll see that under punctuation in AP Style. I want to ensure he would make the team, and you can actually look up just the word ensure to see whether or not it would be applicable here and what the definition is. And then for email, we actually don't hyphenate email. It is just done E-M-A-I-L. Now, one of the biggest changes that we've seen in AP Style has to do with states. It used to be that we would abbreviate the state if the city came before it. AP actually decided in 2014 that we will not be using the abbreviation for any states, regardless of whether they come with the city or not. The exception would be if it's in date lines or photo captions or lists or things like that. So this is a very big change. Learning how AP abbreviated states was one of the most fun aspects of prior classes that we'll still be looking at because they still will be utilized. But in your stories, if you're going to write Sacramento, California, you now have to write out California. Or if you're going to write Columbus, Ohio, you'll include Ohio, which is not, it never was abbreviated. You will have to learn, though, there are cities that don't have states that go after them. So something like Boston doesn't need to have Massachusetts come after it. Los Angeles. So there are certain rules that we'll need to follow still. Titles are a little bit tricky. This is something a lot of students are challenged by. The title that comes before the name is capitalized, and it can be abbreviated in the case of governor. Now, there's certainly others that would be abbreviated. President is not. However, if the title follows the person's name, it is no longer capitalized, and you cannot abbreviate it. So abbreviation and capitalization before the name, no abbreviation, no capitalization after the name. We don't use courtesy titles in AP Style, although you will see them in a paper like the New York Times. They do use them, things like Mr. or Mrs. And what we do when we are citing people is we use their first and last name on first reference, and we use their last name only on second reference. Now, it's tricky if you have two people with the same name, in which case you would use their first name and their last name on both references, all references in the story. AP Style is very specific as it comes to composition titles. There's a whole section devoted to this. So certain things you put in quotes, titles of books, movies, plays, poems, etc. We actually, we see them a lot of times in italics, but we don't use italics in AP Style. There's some exceptions to the quote rule are the Bible and reference books. We don't actually put them in quotes either. And composition titles will differ. You may not realize that there's differences between them, but a newspaper, for for example, the New York Times is not written with quotes around it or in italics or anything. It's just written the New York Times. And then you'll need to know the fact that the in the New York Times is capitalized. So a lot of these things are listed individually. That's an individual entry in the AP Style book, or you can look up under composition titles. So other titles, you're going to capitalize the first word in all principal words. So example here of Law and Order, or he's reading The Hunger Games. But we capitalize titles of magazines and newspapers with, as I said, no quotes or underline, USA Today or Time Magazine being the example here. AP Style cautions us to be really careful about using sexist pronouns. You just can't use he because you don't know if the person's a man or a woman. We really need to be specific. And so example here, a student should do his homework. And it's also wrong to say a student should do their homework because, of course, student is singular. So what would be correct would be a student should do his or her homework, or you could do students should do their homework. But we have to make sure that the agreement with the pronouns is accurate. So single noun gets a single pronoun, and we have to make sure that we use the proper, whether depending on what sex we're talking about. We also have to be careful about some terms that have been around a long time, still creep in, but aren't accurate by AP Style standards. So mailman, fireman, policeman, we don't have those anymore. There are still acceptable to say someone's a spokeswoman or a spokesman or a representative. We don't use spokesperson. We actually identify it one way or the other. The same way with congressman and congresswoman. We use that with members of the House of Representatives, but you wouldn't call them a congressperson, for example. Now, punctuation, these are AP Style in a way, but they're also just proper English. Now, we do have some debates. So one, of course, is the Oxford comma. There's a huge debate going back and forth about whether or not you have the Oxford comma, which is that comma that comes before the conjunction. So if you had, for breakfast, he had orange juice, toast, and ham, we wouldn't have the comma there. The example that I have for you here, we do have it because we have two conjunctions. We have the and ham and the and eggs. But those are things that you're going to have to look up and really pay close attention to.